5.0 special recognitions. There are none tonight. 6.0 additions, corrections, and modifications to the agenda. 6.01 addition of agenda item 11.27, acceptance of gift scholarship from the Center for Green Schools at USGBC. 6.02, addition to the agenda item 11.28, approval of Kelly Educational Services amended rate sheet. And 6.03, modification to motion on agenda item 12.01, approval of K through 12 health curriculum framework. At this time, I'd like to call on Dr. Marty if he could explain and make that motion.
Well, thank you, President Jacob and board members. This evening, you are going to be having a recommendation before you for the approval of the Health and Physical Education Framework and Curriculum Guide for implementation this school year. However, I am recommending that the Healthy Relationship and Sexual Health Framework be tabled until March 9th, 2016 board meeting. First of all, the program evaluation for the health and physical education in Parkway resulted in recommendations to enhance an already excellent program. Several improvements to curriculum are contained in the recommendations, recommended framework. And there were also recommendations made for the enhancement of our healthy relationships and sexual health curriculum framework that resulted in nearly 16 months of discussion with an advisory group. This has resulted in significant dialogue over the past several months with the educators listening and responding to parental and community input. I want to really emphasize and thank all those educators, parents, and others who were part of the advisory meetings, committee, or other discussions. It truly resulted in a lot of dialogue and a lot of discussion. It is our goal in Parkway to provide instructions for students that prepares all our young people for an ever-changing world, consistent with our Parkway mission statement. However, we want to be partners with our parents and larger community. And because questions persist, and because we are committed to using the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services to audit our framework, we want to go beyond the initial review we conducted with additional sample lesson plans for their review and analysis for medical accuracy. In the months between today and March, we are also committed to other work to ensure that the board has all the information needed for the March 9th revisit of this motion. At this time, I would like Dr. Lisa Meredith, who is Assistant Superintendent of our Teaching, Learning, and Accountability, to just also highlight some other work that we will be engaged in the next couple months. Lisa?
Good evening, President Jacob, Vice President Mogerman, members of the board, Dr. Marty and Ms. Stover. Between now and the March Board of Education, we have much work to do to continue to ensure clarity and understanding of the proposed revisions. The work will focus in three main areas. One of the areas will be to ensure that the recommendations are medically accurate and age appropriate. As Dr. Marty shared, we have had 2 initial audits, but one of the auditing organizations said that they could give us more detail if we shared sample lesson plans. We typically do not develop lesson plans until after the curriculum framework is approved, but in this case, we are going to go ahead and ask the Parkway Health educators to develop sample lesson plans that we will then be able to share with you to help you have a better understanding of what implementation of the recommended changes would look like in the classroom. That will allow us to have that second tier of audit. Another main area will be focusing on professional development. We will be able to provide for you a summary of development that happens between now and March, as well as a timeline of development that will happen from March to the beginning of next school year. We will also work on ensuring that those professional learning opportunities are available and that all of our teachers participate, but also based on input from the advisory, we will also work with our counselors and nurses to have the same professional development. So we will be able to provide you the topics for development as well as the timeline. And then the third big area that we will ensure that we continue to work on between now and March is communication with our families, which was a concern that came up through program evaluation. So over the coming months, our health educators will work on finalizing the website that Mr. Ramspot has talked about having for families to be able to use to have a better understanding of the curriculum, as well as resources for our families to use if they want to continue conversations at home and are seeking resources. The letters for families that they will be receiving explaining the curriculum and how to opt out if they so desire will be available on that. And then also part of the communication with families is communication about sample resources. And so we will work between now and March to make some decisions on the rubrics of how we will ensure that resources are neutral, developmentally appropriate, and medically accurate. So between now and March, we will continue work in that and be able to provide you continued updates.
Dr. Meredith and Superintendent, we appreciate that and appreciate everyone's willingness to work through this to the good for our kids. We appreciate that. We have several citizen statements that we want to get to right now. We'd ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes so we can get through in a reasonable period of time. And if you would state your name and address, we'd appreciate it if that's possible. And we're going to probably follow through a little bit better than we did last month. So when we get to 3 minutes, we will definitely let you know. We appreciate it, though. I'd like to begin with Amy Brown.
My name is Amy Brown. I live at 1801 Farm Valley Drive. I have sons in 3rd grade and 4th grade at Highcroft Ridge. I was inspired to speak tonight because of the email going around about rejecting the proposed sex ed curriculum. There's a sentence about the fear that teaching information about homosexuality and transgender issues will inspire our kids to become gay or transgender. I was raised by open liberal parents who discussed fact and opinion about everything under the sun. Some examples: sex, sexuality, lawn care, religion, drugs, doing taxes, race, racism, homework, money, responsibility, and consequences. Getting factual information from the 1980s school sex ed curriculum, as well as my parents' opinions and values, gave me knowledge and confidence. I could then make my own decisions. Learning how to mow the lawn did not make me want to ever mow a lawn. Learning about other religions did not make me want to change my religion. And learning about transgender people did not make me want to take male hormones, stop shaving my legs, and get a surgically attached penis. Not that there's anything wrong with that. The school lessons, plus open communication and factual information I received, simply taught me everything. A fellow Parkway parent who is opposed to this curriculum said to me, quote, "I didn't know kids at the age of 13 had any sexual awareness." She's about to find out when her son starts locking his bedroom door and taking really long showers. His body is about to become his amusement park, and he'll have no one to talk to about his new feelings that he fears make him a weirdo. And he'll have no one to ask questions to, and Lord knows what he's going to find on the internet. Those who aren't taught factual information have to seek and find on their own, very often getting incorrect information, like a woman who does her own taxes incorrectly and gets audited, or a boy who doesn't know why he's convinced he should live his life as a girl and kills himself. Not talking is not the answer. Having knowledge makes you confident. Having confidence makes you awesome, whether you are gay, straight, transgender, or an accountant. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Thank you. Our next person on the list is John Eichman.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Eichman, address 2142 White Lane Drive. And just to start off, I am an accountant, so I won't take offense to any of the comments that were made. So to start out, first of all, I feel that schools are there for us to teach facts and not ideologies. But I do think that the proposed curriculum on gender identity and sexual orientation clearly blurs the lines between fact and ideology. And I think teachers and schools build credibility with students when they clearly teach facts. But by delving into ideologies, whether it's perceived or real ideologies, some parents will be forced to tell their kids not to believe what is being taught at school. And I think that, too, sends a very negative message to our kids. In my opinion, this can cause doubt as to what they should believe and shouldn't believe. The other concern I have is that there's clearly a risk, and whether, once again, it's a real risk or perceived risk, that agendas and ideologies will influence what is being taught. This detracts from the credibility of the educational process at Parkway and will also distract the school district from focusing on fact-based core curriculum that is critical to our kids. In my brief review of the proposed curriculum, the lessons to me appeared to be one-sided and ideological. I quickly found professional association statements that contradicted or at least presented a differing view of what was proposed in the curriculum, and that troubles me. A couple comments with regards to the time period between now and March. I don't believe that additional time will settle the issue of ideology versus fact, and this will continue to be an ideological discussion in part or in whole. So in conclusion, I think children in middle and high school clearly deal with many changes and challenges at that age. I think our schools play a very important part in the educational development of our kids. But I also believe that one of my primary objectives and roles as a parent is to help my children develop socially, emotionally, and ideologically as well. Not that they will be robots of who I am, but certainly I believe that that's one of the influences that I carry and one of the responsibilities that I carry as a parent. And I don't want to be in a position where the school district contradicts ideologies that I have or impedes what I'm trying to do in terms of my responsibilities to my kids. 3 minutes. Thank you very much, and hopefully this discussion will go well.
Thank you very much. And may I now call Connie Hertzler. You could maybe not applaud so we can get to him a little quicker too. Thanks.
Thank you, President Jacob and Dr. Marty and the board for hearing my comments. I'm Connie Hertzler. My address is 1453 Schulte Hill Drive, Maryland Heights, 63043. And I'm going to just read my comments, if that's all right. It's shorter that way. Knowing that there will not be a vote about the sexual health frameworks, I would like to ask about what is appropriate to teach now. If the new curriculum is not presently approved, it would seem that last year when my son took health, the staff at North overstepped what was appropriate then. The following two classes and their descriptions were sent to me by the teacher, and the first one was called Understanding Gender and Relationships, and then the second one was LGBTQ Myth Busting. The teacher was up front, gave me the right to opt out, yet if this curriculum was not approved, I see a big problem. The class on Understanding Gender Relationships, I just want to share what she shared with me. It's the description is teens will examine messages about gender stereotypes and identity, the harmful consequences to these stereotypes. This lesson breaks down the difference between gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and attraction. Teens will also explore how gender stereotypes contribute to unhealthy and abusive relationships. The objectives, there were 3. The first one was to understand gender and distinctions between gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and attraction. The second was to identify how gender is learned, where students get their ideas and images regarding gender and dating. And then the third was to recognize how strict gender roles may contribute to dating and violence, or dating violence and abuse. So the second issue I have is that teachers at North are presently being trained in the new curriculum according to an insider of mine. Their last training took place September 30th. Why would they be approved for training if it has not been passed? This is very troubling. If Parkway schools are going ahead with it, what is the purpose of our discussion now? The Parkway Board, your leadership, these are questions I would really like to have answered. Thanks.
Thank you. Peggy Welker.
Thank you, members of the board. Thank you, Dr. Marty, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Peggy Welker. My address is 13165 Amiot Drive, and I have a daughter at Northeast Middle School. I want to start off by saying that certainly I don't want any students to be bullied or marginalized because of any aspect of who they are, whether it's gender, race, ethnicity, religion, disabilities, or sexuality. But I'm also very concerned that in attempting to protect a specific class of people, gender orientation, we are doing harm by over-educating the entire population of students. So I would ask the Parkway School Board to please consider some of the questions that I have, and then I'll give my comments over to the secretary. I'm concerned that the children in the district will be sexualized at an early age with any curriculum that is delivered. I may be uninformed about this, but I want to ask the board to address that issue. Secondly, does gender spectrum theory meet the Missouri state law requirement that information is medically accurate? Third, has Parkway considered that teaching this curriculum will lead to more frustration among students who cannot legally get gender reassignment surgery until they're 18 years old? How will this affect their sense of empowerment and autonomy? I'm very concerned that material being covered here, if our children went home and Googled it, it would put them at risk for online predators or possibly get them arrested for pornography because of the sexually explicit and graphic nature of some of the material. I may be uninformed, it's just a question that I have. I'm very concerned as a parent that there's no mention of clinical staff that I know of, such as they have in the KEYS program, making sure that they're licensed professional counselors or clinical social workers implementing these conversations. What certifications or qualifications do teachers have to deliver this level of medical information? I'm concerned, is this an evidence-based practice or evidence-based curriculum? And I'm concerned that not all stakeholders have been invited to participate. I know that Thrive has a program that's medically accurate. I've observed some of their modules, and they deliver it to the St. Louis County schools in the St. Louis County District. Were they consulted? Do you have plans to consult with them? I believe they have an evidence-based model called Best Choices. I have a flyer for that. Have you spoken with them? And I hope that if any slides were presented at any forums that had the Thrive logo on there, they were presented, permission was given by Thrive to have those slides. I have more questions, but I don't want to take up a lot of time. Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you very much. Barb Waite.
Good evening. I'm Barb Waite. My address is 10 Summerhill Lane, Chesterfield, 63017. And I have 3 students, 2 at Parkway West High, 1 at Parkway West Middle. And thank you for hearing me again. I have been on the advisory committee for the past 16 months. And I do thank you for, Dr. Marty, for taking the time to table this motion. My understanding in your letter is that it would be so that we could look at some of the sample lessons. And I do have an example of one of the sample lessons that we saw on September 29th. It is about the 7th grade curriculum. I can show it to you. But in the 7th grade curriculum, the 7th graders will learn to identify things that factor into their personal identity: biological sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, character traits, personality, values, and beliefs. Gender identity is defined as a person's internal sense of being male, female, or a combination of these.
My comments today, just to preface things, will not have anything to do with any opinion on the issues at hand, but on process. And I can think of organizations and processes that bring success, and they're all very structured, very disciplined, very transparent. Sometimes that brings a little pain along the way. But at the end of the day, those organizations and processes bring the right results, no matter how they fall. And I would just encourage folks to keep that on the straight and narrow as we move forward. Transparency and thoroughness is critical. I'd like to believe my wife and I are pretty plugged into what goes on. We're very involved in school. But I have to admit, we've been a little bit late to the party with things here, and I'm sure some of that is our fault. But I just kind of wonder if there would have been a little more awareness in the communication that takes place, be it through the individual Southwest Middle School, which our daughter attends, or through other methods. My guess is that we would have arrived on time at the party. And so I would just encourage that piece to be in play in the coming 9 months or so. It can be a lot and can be overwhelming, but when it's your responsibility to be good stewards to the community in that, that's critical. And if people want to dismiss it, that's fine. But I can tell you this, thousands of people want to be plugged in. So just please follow through on that if you would. As you move forward through structuring things, and certainly there will need to be some changes, several people have talked about the credibility and what will structure these teachings, and that will be important. And it can't just be one organization that has some facts to back things up. I think it needs to be several. It adds credibility to one's argument when you're trying to push policy down, and it frankly provides some protections to all of you that when you make a decision, you can pull back and say, well, see, we have these facts here to back us up. I don't doubt that the stewards of this proposed plan had the best intentions. Perhaps there were some pressures to find some policy, put it in place, no matter what the reason. And I won't go so far as to say they have agendas, because I don't think that's the case. But the fact that you've applied the brakes to things allows us to take a good, closer look at things and to move slowly. And while it's good to have a target for when you want to have these policies in place, it's okay to apply the brakes again if they don't hit the mark. And I just want to be sure that that's out front as well. The science and the facts have to lead the right decision. It just has to. And if it needs to take longer, it needs to take longer. This is not the relationship between chunking and mathematics. This is pretty important stuff, so let's get it right.
Thank you very much.
Chris, will you please?
Okay. And if I could ask you again to please withhold your applause, we'd appreciate it. Our next person is Delissa Fair. Did I get that right? Okay, maybe she's not here. Is there a Delissa, and I just got the last name wrong? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, then our next one is, I believe, Kristen Dunn.
Hi, I'm Kristen Dunn, and my address is 508 Briarwick Drive, Baldwin, Missouri, and I have a daughter who attends Parkway West Middle. And for time, I will just read this to you really quickly. I've attended several of the Health Advisory Committee meetings and am concerned regarding Parkway's continual pursuit to implement a health curriculum that is not medically accurate. I realize the Missouri State Department of Health and Senior Services has reviewed the curriculum and determined it to be medically accurate. However, Mr. Ramspot shared at the last Health Advisory Committee meeting, review of the curriculum for medical accuracy is not a service the Missouri State Health Department routinely performs. Do we really want to implement a curriculum that has not been reviewed by professionals who deal with the issue on a daily basis? There is still much division and much to be learned within the medical community regarding the issues of gender identity and sexual orientation. Across the practice of medicine, there are no generally agreed upon practice guidelines for treatment, assistance, intervention for patients dealing with gender identity and sexual orientation. I've attached an article that I will give to the Secretary from one of the leading medical institutions in the country, Johns Hopkins, which delineates some of the areas in which there's a lack of consensus within the practice of medicine. I would urge the board to go an additional step in the process of developing this curriculum as it relates to gender identity and sexual orientation, and involve the leading medical institutions in the community of St. Louis. Please consider contacting Barnes, Jewish Children's, Mercy, SSM Health, and St. Luke's to develop a physician-led committee with the goal of obtaining input from leading psychiatrists, pediatricians, and surgeons regarding these topics as they relate to children and developing adolescents, asking these physicians to represent the position of their respective organizations and the medical community at large. This will ensure Parkway meets the obligation for due diligence in considering the changes to this curriculum. Thank you.
Christina Stephenson.
Hi, my name is Christina Stevenson. My address is 48 White Plains Drive, Chesterfield, Missouri, 63017. And I have a 5-year-old daughter who's in kindergarten at Shenandoah Valley. I appreciate all of the comments tonight. This isn't a new subject for most of you, so just to get to the point, the Parent Advisory Council, when this subject was first started, it was actually quite small. I know you've talked about it being on the agenda for about 16 months, but from my understanding, I just came into this about a month ago, but from my understanding of people that have been in it longer than myself, it was a very small group at the beginning, so we did not have as many parents involved as we do now. And even at that, it's a very small percentage. I believe that there's a lot of parents in the Parkway School District that are unaware of this new curriculum proposal. And I know that it was talked about earlier, a 3-part fold. One part was communication with families. I think having a website that they can go to just is not enough. Most parents trust the school district, and when they get an email that just has a link to a website, a lot of times they don't go on there and they don't look. They just assume that everyone has done their job and that their children will be taught correctly. So my biggest thing is that parents need to know what's going to be taught. They need to know what the curriculum is. I think email is great. I think some of these subject matters should be sent to a school-wide email. This affects every parent that has a child in the school district. We have their emails. Let's let them know what's going on. Parents are their children's first teachers. They know their children, they know how they're going to respond, and how they're going to deal with information. So I believe that the parents need to be empowered with that, and I know that as the board, that is part of your responsibility, is to hear the parents of these children. I am only one voice, but I believe that many voices need to be heard on this, and that just has not happened. Not enough people are aware of this in the school district. And then I just wanted to quickly comment. I know you've heard many comments about the samples, but this is one from an 8th grade sample. I don't know if you have read the sample lessons, but it says, this is healthy message number 5. There are many theories about what determines sexual orientation, but many experts agree that people do not choose their sexual orientation. There's nothing listed here about how there's also many experts that believe that that it is a choice, and that's not listed here. It's definitely one-sided. Parents need to know and be aware. Thank you.
Do you have any idea what that last name? Heads together, and we think the next person is Kathy Coyle. Is that right? Kathy? You're going to help us out. There's some writing over it, so I couldn't quite tell, but.
Going to be on, but I'll speak. My name's Kathy Coyle. I live at 1587 Rosewood Terrace in Baldwin. And I sent a letter that I had written to the board, and I'll just share a few points. One of them is I think a lot of this is around respect, and I have a son who attends Southwest Middle in 6th grade, and I always tell him that, no matter, what your value system is, you should respect the other person, whether they have a disability, they're a different religion, a different race, and that extends to a different, orientation. But I feel as a parent, I have the right to teach my son morally and religiously what I believe, and I don't think the schools should impede on that in any way. I think they should have resources available if there are students who want more information and can go to a counselor and get it, but I don't think that I should have to have my son opt out of something that my tax dollars are paying for that I believe impedes on what I believe morally and have taught him. Another thing is I wanted to share from one of the 7th grade lesson plans was a healthy message that talked about gender identification and that it was okay to decide what gender you are. And again, there's nothing about the counterpoint on the other side that, others believe that you are the gender you are born with, that you are either male or female. So I do feel it is one-sided, and I also feel that the only notification I got of a meeting about this was the last meeting, and I did attend it, and I got the notification from a friend of mine who's involved in Moms in Prayer at Carmen Elementary. So otherwise, I would have had no knowledge about it. So I agree with the previous parent who talked about the lack of communication, and I feel like a lot of this has been swept under the rug. Thank you.
Thank you, too. Our next person is Angela English. There she goes.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Marty. Thank you, board. My name is Angela English. I live at 16 Ridge Creek. My daughter attends West by special assignment because she grew up in the West Attendance District. I have 4 children. This is my last one going through Parkway West. I also worked as a guest teacher in the Parkway District when we first moved here. I wanted to be sure that I had chosen correctly, when we moved into the St. Louis area. My children's father grew up, went to this school, went to Central, graduated from Mizzou, and when we were trying to figure out where to move our divorced family, because we were amicably divorced, we decided this would be the best place, and there are many reasons for that. I want to first state that I'm very thankful to Dr. Meredith. I had a problem this summer with something that was said during the teaching of a health class that my youngest child attended, and the child came to me, my daughter. She was upset, and I represented her. Dr. Meredith was impeccable in the way that she handled this. Absolutely. And I thank you for your transparency. I believe you're doing your best. I ultimately think that it is the parent's job to know what is going on in a classroom and what is happening. So to tell you, in my opinion, that you need to send out an email to all of the schools, and I've taught in many of them, is ridiculous, number one. Number two, it impedes from what you're doing. Most people complain about big government. That's big government. Handle what you're supposed to handle. The third thing I want to say is I think every parent here, regardless of how they feel, are united by the same things. We're not raising children. I don't want a bunch of infants. I want my child off my couch, and I want them to be responsible and contributing to the society. Okay? We have different ideas about how we get there. My oldest daughter came out. She's a lesbian. She's in a wonderful relationship. Wonderful relationship. There are people that live in this district who are LGBTQ and they don't have supportive families. Wonderful. Wonderful for those that do. That's such a wonderful privilege and very fortunate. But they don't, and they need accurate information. There has been some misquoted, inaccurate information here. Dr. McHugh, the former psychiatrist in chief at Johns Hopkins, simply said that gender reassignment surgery is not the cure-all, that people who are trans need more social support. That is what he said. So if we're going to quote, what we need to quote are the facts. Let's do let's delay. I'm thankful that you're delaying, because there is longitudinal, cross-sectional information out there that supports the neuroscience of gender fluidity. Don't be afraid, parents. Don't be afraid.
Emily Fries.
Hi, I'm Emily Frazee. Address is 14037 Boxford. We are new to the district this year. I sent an email in a couple days ago. Thank you for your quick response and for allowing us to come before you and discuss these issues. There's been a lot of talk tonight. It's been obviously an interesting discussion. Just like last time, I don't think I'll go out with quite a bang as our last presenter did at the last board meeting. But I just continually hear a couple of themes. One of them really is around just respect in general, and the last parent who was up here is absolutely right. We do have different ideas on how we should raise our children, and there are different ideas surrounding the topic at hand, and we really need to focus on what is the difference between the ideas and the ideology and the facts. And second to that, or in conjunction with that, is respect for ideas. We need to be respectful of ideas. And I think one of the hardest tasks you all have as the board and then our educators have is how do you teach respect without teaching or condemning a certain viewpoint. I read one of the textbooks that's considered an educational resource on one of the groups that is being referenced for the curriculum, and I was reading through it, and it was slightly graphic, but the last statement in the book, and I can provide you the name of it, was, some people don't agree with this X and X lifestyle, and it's just because they're afraid. That is not what I want my child to be taught, any of my children. You all have a responsibility to teach facts and respect, and I do not envy your position of teaching respect of differing facts, but I expect that you all focus on the facts moving forward. As a new parent, I look forward to participating in the health curriculum meetings going forward, and I'm looking for facts in that curriculum and those meetings. I know I've heard a lot of concern over facts and what's ideological and what isn't, and I do think there are some suggestions that can be made around clarifying that for sure. So I look forward to the next several months. Thank you for delaying this component of the curriculum, and I do hope that you all take the time to consider parent feedback and really focus on both the factual components of this and how you're going to teach respect for different ideologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's our last citizen statement tonight. I appreciate very much, we all do on the board, the comments of so many of you. We appreciate our parents, and what a privilege it is to have your children in our schools too. So we want you to know that we appreciate you, and we appreciate the feedback, and hope that you will continue to be involved in this process. You will receive a letter in the mail to respond to your statement tonight. Should we take a quick break? We'll take about a 5-minute break and then come back to the rest of the board work. Thank you again. Go to the boring part of our meeting. 8.0, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education scheduled for Wednesday, October 21st, 2015?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries 6-0. 9.0 resolutions, there are none. 10.0 communications, 10.01 calendar of meetings. The next regular board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 11th, 2015 at 7 p.m. here at Central Middle School, with an anticipated closed session at 6 p.m. 10.02 board liaison reports. Anybody have any liaison reports they'd like to give?
I would just like to report that myself, Mr. Jacob, Mrs. Feldman, Dr. Marty, Mr. Applebaum, who's not here, attended the MSBA conference, which is a Missouri School Board Association conference at Tantera a few weeks ago, and just had a wonderful time. It was time very well spent. We broke up we all went to different focus groups. We learned on various different topics related directly to running a school board, being on a school board, future trends, various different topics related, and it was just time well spent, well deserved, and appreciate the opportunity to have attended.
Can I just jump in? Because maybe somebody else would say this, but I just don't want this to go. Desi Kirchhoffer and others were involved. Desi was the kind of lead, did a wonderful job of presenting our intruder training, and it was well received and well attended. So I know some of you may want to be very knowledgeable of the fact that we're actually doing some things that a lot of people in the state are envious of, and we're kind of the leaders. And Mr. Kirchhoffer did a great job of presenting that. Fred Crawford and others were helping in the planning.
Right, and it so happened to have taken place the day after there was another tragic shooting in Utah at a junior college, and so it was very topical. The room was standing room only, and I think a lot of people stayed behind after you were finished with your presentation to ask questions and get more information, both from you and from the St. Louis County police officers that attended.
Thank you. Anyone else? You stole my thunder. That's okay. The St. Louis police were impressive too. I mean, those guys, I think they have more muscles now than they did when they made their...
I felt very safe being there.
It was an incredible day when they came and did that for us and helped us do that training and intruder training for our faculty and staff on one day to train basically 1,000 people on how to react in different ways that you can react instead of just hiding in a corner in your room. There are things you can do that actually will make you safer and slow down that intruder until the police get there. And it was all of that was presented in this course to other school districts and superintendents that are interested in how can they do that in their school. Today, this morning, Dr. Marty and I had an opportunity to attend the 27th time that Central High here has hosted a Special Olympics. They have generally done this around the field sport of soccer. 320 special education students came here. That in itself is incredible, from the different schools that they come and field the team and get to feel like winners on that day. But to me, as impressive, maybe even more impressive, were the 400 or so volunteer students from Central High that literally took these kids under their arms, and some of them needed that kind of help to get from one event to another. Not all of them played soccer. Some of them spent a lot of time in the carnival area that they had, but just you would have really been proud of your kids as they took care of some of these special needs kids and made it special for them that day. Even our band, Doug Hoover had them playing so long they ran out of material. But that's a very special day for some very special kids, and to see that kind of sacrifice and service given was just something special. Anything else?
Mr. Jacob, can I just mention, I had the pleasure to accompany Oak Brook Elementary in their receipt of the National School of Character Award this last weekend in Atlanta. And I was so proud of Chris Shirley and Kevin Helton, his staff, and actually a parent also. And we'll be recognizing them later, I know, but it was just wonderful to see them be part of this national program. 67 schools were honored as nationwide, and here in Oak Brook, Oak Brook was one of those. And we have now had 3 National Schools of Character, Ross, McKelvey, and now Oak Brook is our 3rd, so very, very proud of their work. And they did a presentation, and it was well attended, and people were very impressed with their service learning, their Veterans Day program, their Kids Council, and so they had a lot to share.
I participated in that Veterans Day parade down at Oak Brook, where they walk you around and the kids are lined up on each side waving flags, and it certainly felt a lot better than the old Vietnam days when I served. Thank you. 10.03, Board Subcommittee Reports. There was a TLA Subcommittee meeting on October 15th at 3 p.m. Does anybody want to say anything about that? We've already been giving accolades to Lisa, but she always has a good meeting.
I just want to say thank you to those of you who hold these meetings for us. It's great as a representative group of the board to hear specific reports and activities that are taking place in various aspects of the administration in the district. And we appreciate the time. We know that's one other thing you need to do, but you do it gracefully and certainly do it generously to inform us. And just having the opportunity for the dialogue really helps to learn and to be able to provide feedback as well. So we appreciate it very much.
Thank you, too, Lee. Yes.
Just to add what Sam and Chris have said, when we met last week with Lisa, it's a great opportunity for board members, whether you're on the TLA subcommittee or Chelsea subcommittee or your subcommittee, it's a great opportunity for us to have dialogue, because as many of you can see, we do a lot of listening and we do a lot of reading, but we don't get that much of an opportunity to have back and forth conversation, to take a subject a step further than perhaps we've read about or we've heard about in a presentation. And it gives us a better understanding of the work that we're doing, and we're so appreciative of the time that you guys devote to us. So thank you.
To that meeting with a little incident. I thought there were some long delays in getting on some of the computers in the district, especially at elementary level. They were already aware of it and working through the issues, and I'm happy to report that things are much better in some cases. What was reported as 15, 20 minutes is down in that 1 to 2 minute level, which may not still be acceptable, but it's so much better than and just it was nice to see them on top of that and taking care of the problems so that instructional time wouldn't be affected. Thank you, everyone. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented here in the October 20?
That our sub-nurses have a minimum of an RN. We do not accept LPNs in our schools. This again narrows the pool of candidates that we have to attract. So if you're an RN and you can work in the industry for anywhere between $70,000 and above, again, the option to sub might just be for personal convenience, but again, the candidate pool then becomes narrower. So we believe by increasing our prices, increasing our daily rate for our nurses, we should be able to attract at least 12 to 15 more subs to serve our students here in Parkway. We have also internally looked at the substitute program. We have recommended that a floating sub be hired as a first line of intervention to go to the school if we have an absent nurse, and then we would go to Kelly, and then if their pool is depleted, then we would go to the third-party agency. So we would be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have, and would appreciate your consideration for this price increase.
Amy and Robin, if we do hire a floating nurse to cover absences, and we have a day where all of our nurses are in attendance, what would be the plan for that nurse's work?
So I will let Dr. Wallen address her plans.
So one of the needs that we have is to provide some extra support at the elementary level, because a lot of our elementary nurses are feeling really overwhelmed with the amount of paperwork and screenings and such. So my hope is that we can actually provide a little bit of support at that level, and also free up nurses to do things like trainings and workshops and that kind of activity. So I have no doubt she will be very busy.
Define what frequent, extended, and long-term really means.
It's a really good question. No, daily rate is just the maybe I'll work Monday, maybe I'll work Wednesday. I'm in a different building every day. Then we have the definition of the frequent sub, and the frequent sub is a substitute that works for 6 or more days within any 2-week period. And then we have the definition of the extended sub, and the extended sub works for 11 to 45 days, and then the long-term sub works for more than 45 days.
And you're confident that $20 is going to be able to, if some of these people are getting 30, 35, we'll still get a representative sample of good RN nurses?
I asked for a recommendation from Kelly because based on their recruitment, I said, give me a number. I have to know where we stand. And this is the recommendation that they came to us with, and I'm comfortable with it. Of course, we will be monitoring, and they have also extended some really great partnerships with local universities that have RN programs. So they're hoping to get some graduates just out of college that we could maybe bring into Parkway and train. So, the other great thing is our staffing company is an opportunity for us to get a first look at those employees for then future employment. While I don't want to use them as a recruitment, they certainly serve that purpose.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
How is this going to affect our budget?
So we did an analysis of the number of days that we used for nurses last year, and then we backed out the number of days that we have used thus far this current school year, and Patty has recommended an increase of $42,000. And again, that is just an estimate, and of course our sub-bus budget is based on usage. And so we don't know really, with hiring of the floating sub, that would certainly bring that cost down.
Okay, any other questions? Well, we certainly need the nurses, and our kids need it. I'll never forget my wife, her first day at Henry, she volunteered in the nurses department, and wouldn't you know it, on that day my son showed up with a bloody nose. But it wasn't from a fight. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, we thank both of you. Sorry.
That's okay.
May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda item 11.28 as it is in the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries 6-0. Thank you. 12.0 action items. There are none. Well, do I need to vote on that, or did we already? Probably do need to vote on that, don't we?
We just took out part of it, remember? We're voting on it.
I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the Health and Physical Education Curriculum Framework and Curriculum Guide for implementation during 2015-2016 school year, and that the Healthy Relationships and Sexual Health Frameworks be tabled until the March 9th, 2016 board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Is there any discussion?
Is there any discussion? Questions? Okay. Roll call, Nikki.
Mrs. Applebaum?
Yes.
Mrs. Feldman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopper?
Yes.
Dr. Ciortino?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. 13.0 policy review. We have two policies for review tonight. 13.01 GBGD.BP, workers' compensation, and GBEC.BP, drug-free workplace. Are there any questions on these policies from any member of the board? Then Patty, you don't have to come up to the podium. Thank you very much. These policies will be up for approval at the November 11th, 2015 board meeting. 14.0, 14.01, Goal 1, capable learners. I will we'll call on Lisa Meredith, Dr. Lisa Meredith, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability, and Kevin Beckner, Coordinator of Student Assessment, and sometimes he wears a cape.
Mr. Jacob, can I?
Please.
Since we have so many people here in the audience tonight, I just think it's important for them to understand that we are starting now this month, and it will continue for the next 6 months or through the 6 Project Parkway goals. We do this annually for a number of years now, and so Lisa's starting off with Goal 1, which is capable learners, and this will continue through our 6 goals. So just so everybody understands, this is an update of really the important work of Project Parkway, and Dr. Meredith is, and her TLA staff oversees, obviously, Goals 1 and 2.
Thank you. Good evening again. Before I officially start talking about Goal 1, Ron, are any of your teachers still here? Where's Ron? I would like to thank all the health and PE teachers who are here who have put a lot of time into the curriculum framework that you just approved for our physical education and our health curriculum. So health and PE teachers, thank you so much for all your time. It is my pleasure to be here this evening, and I'm going to speak very briefly about Goal 1. But as you saw in the report, we have a lot to celebrate in Goal 1. We've continued to do work around our curriculum, around our assessments, around developing and implementing rigorous learning experiences, growing our choice programs, continuing to enhance technology integration, providing a wealth of professional learning for our teachers and administrators around good curriculum and instruction in the classrooms, the expansion of our early learning programs so that we can ensure that more students are ready for kindergarten when they come. And I just received an email this afternoon. We are up to 16 students in the second classroom of the MPP grant, so we're very close to getting full reimbursement for that. 2 more students by the end of the month, so that was great news from Dr. Amaral this afternoon. At the next board meeting, you will hear our achievement report, and at that point, Mr. Beckner will go more in depth into the achievements that we have achieved through our work around Goal 1, as well as areas for growth. We know we still have growth. But for the purpose of this evening, I want to focus in to a small part of Goal 1. And so if we look at our Parkway vision statements, our vision statements talk about our students being increasingly self-directed, skilled, and persistent as learners. For our students to be self-directed, they need good feedback. They need to understand the purpose for their learning and where they are in that trajectory. We also, if we look at our strategic plan, which, yes, stays in my notebook and goes with me, under Goal 1, there are some very specific action steps, and I starred them so I could make sure I read them. Increase parent involvement and communication regarding assessment results, including district assessments and learning. Research and implement improved grading practices that provide feedback and clearly communicate student performance related to our goals, standards, and mission-related outcomes. And review and revise student progress reporting systems to communicate student growth towards Stage 1 desired results and criteria in all courses. Over the past couple of years, Kevin Beckner has been doing work through our assessment and progress monitoring team, along with other work teams that he's worked with, to study and learn about better ways to give students feedback on their learning, as well as how to give families feedback on how their students are learning. This has resulted in a new system for reporting progress to families, which directly aligns to Goal 1, and that goes live in November. And so I thought we would take the Goal 1 report this evening for an update on the process and answer any questions that you may have in relationship to the new progress reporting system at our elementary schools. Mr. Beckner?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight. President Jacob, Vice President Mogerman, Dr. Marty, Ms. Stover, members of the board. I appreciate the chance to talk about grading for learning. And so we'll actually open with a quote that a carefully developed grading system can help us improve student performance over time. not just label it at periodic intervals over time. What we want to do is actually use our grading system to promote learning. To use our grading system not just to label students, not just to assign a point value, but actually to improve their learning and help us achieve our mission so that students will be capable, curious, and confident. And we really started this work around grading not because I wanted to talk about it, Dr. Marty wanted to talk about it, any of us wanted to talk about it, but actually because our teachers started changing their practice as they started learning more about good feedback and giving them the opportunity to hear more succinctly about how they're doing and providing them feedback in different ways. In fact, it was at a board meeting just a couple years ago that you guys heard this quote from one of our teachers at South High, that instead of coming and asking, this is after she changed her grading practice, instead of coming and asking, what do I need to do to get my grade up? That changing her grading practice has actually changed the conversation. So it was more about, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do to learn this? Not, how do I get extra credit? What tissues do I bring? What canned food can I bring? But actually, what do I need to do to learn this? And how can I change that conversation so that it's not just about a grade, but it's really about the learning and really about leveraging that grade so that students achieve more. We do have, as Dr. Meredith mentioned, an action step in our strategic plan. She already referenced it, but just so we know where this is coming from, as our teachers were moving forward with this work, Project Parkway recognized that this was something valuable that could really leverage something we're already doing to higher levels of learning for our kids. And so it was included as an action step in Project Parkway to research and implement improved grading practices. We've had a lot of conversations, and I want to run you through some of these because they've been going on a long time. We actually started formal conversations way back in 2011-12 with a grading and feedback work team that was part of our assessment and progress monitoring team. Really, that group just studied and learned more about what is out there about grading practices, what does the research say, what are other schools doing. In 12-13, we expanded that, and we actually had several different groups. We had a Project Parkway advisory, specifically to engage our community around assessment practices and grading and those kinds of conversations. We held 2 grading summits over the course of the year. Since we had teachers engaged in changing their grading practices, we brought them in and said, tell us what you're doing. Let us learn from you, and let's learn from each other with the work that you're doing. We had the grading and feedback work team that continued from 2011 and 12. And then importantly, we had a teacher assessment advisory where we brought together teachers from every school in the district, met monthly over the course of the year to study and learn about grading practices together. This team spent the whole year actually starting from the beginning and saying, well, what are we trying to do with grades? What's the purpose? What are we really trying to accomplish here? And after a year of work, they came up with this purpose statement. That with all the things we use grades for, and there are lots of uses for them, really the primary purpose is to communicate kids' learning. That's what we're trying to do, is communicate how well students are meeting the expectations in their given courses. They also developed 5 practices and principles that support this belief statement so that grades clearly communicate progress when, and so we have 5 of them, when those grades communicate achievement of the goals of the course. This is actually important because we have a long history, and many of us experienced it as students, where a lot of our grade was based on doing, not necessarily learning. Both are important, but we really want to make sure that kids are learning and learning at a high level. We want to make sure that grades communicate through being clear about the level of performance required to get a certain grade. That it's not really okay with all the things, especially when you get to our upper grades, like in high schools, where there are scholarship dollars, accolades, awards, college acceptance dependent on those things, that you could get a different grade just because you're in one teacher's class than another. We want that level of what's expected to get an A, what's expected to get a B, or whatever we call the system, that we're clear about what students have to do to earn those grades. Thirdly, that the behaviors that impact learning, they're important. They're valued and they're reported separately. That I can be a wonderful student who comes to class every day prepared and does everything I'm supposed to, but I might still struggle. Well, which are we reporting and valuing? We want them to do both. We want them to be quality students who are responsible and do all the things that we know good students do, but also make sure they're learning at a high level. Fourthly, that learning is communicated not just in a general overall summary, but get specific about what is it that we're learning. And let's get specific about those given things rather than being an overall summary. And lastly, that grades should reflect, and they clearly communicate when they reflect the most accurate estimate of the grade of the student's achievement at the time the grade is given. This is important because it's not just an average of performance over time, but actually right now. Where are you right now? Are you meeting the expectations? Are you not meeting the expectations right now? And as this group worked and looked at these principles, their primary recommendation, this teacher assessment advisory, their primary recommendation was revise the elementary reporting system to reflect these beliefs. We saw a lot of things that weren't working in our elementary system that didn't show that these were the things that we believed about grading. And I'll share just a few numbers with you to kind of illustrate that. One of those things is 200. 200 is the number of things that are on an elementary progress report by the end of the year. And there's a lot of research that says if you give people more than 6 things at a time, it actually feels like you're getting less. That makes sense. Just, I'm overwhelmed with information. 200 different things on our elementary progress report. If we want to clearly communicate, that's a challenge when you have 200 things in a given report. 1,200. If you had 22 students in your classroom as a Parkway Elementary teacher, you're rating, in our current report card, you're rating students on 1,200 different items over the course of a single trimester. The challenge with that, of course, is if we know that feedback is really what's valuable, feedback is really what's important, we're really stretching our teachers, asking them to rate students on 1,200 things in really a very short period of time. 21 is the number of things in English alone, between reading, writing, speaking, listening, that we report. The challenge with that, of course, is for most of our parents are non-educators, and we're really speaking a lot of education ease to them. And I know this firsthand. My wife is not in education, and we experienced this in our first conference. I'll tell you a little bit about that in 1 second. 85%. Shockingly, this is actually the percent of students over the last 5 years at the end of the year in Parkway Elementary Schools who've got A's or B's in their classes. 85%. One of the challenges with that is not that 85% of students are getting A's and B's, but it's how we define an A and a B. In our current elementary reporting system, we actually say an A is excellent and a B is above average. It is difficult for 85% of people to be above average. Mathematically speaking, it's just hard to do. So that brings me actually to this number, and this is an important thing with our elementary system that is a frequent point of misconception. 0 is the number of scales in our current elementary system that are based on points and percents. That's a challenge for a lot of us because we went through years of school where our experience was you do things that get points, we convert those points into percentages, we turn those percentages into letters, and that's how you get grades. In our elementary school, our grading scale does not say A is 90 to 100, B is 80 to 89, C is 70 to 79. We do that starting in middle school and on up through high school. But in our elementary schools, we have 0 of our scales are based on that. They say that an A is excellent, a B is above average. And in elementary, for our youngest learners, there's a lot of good reasons for that. One of them is this number 7. 7 is the number of hours in our school day. My daughter's at school with her teacher much more than she's with me. And in our elementary schools, as opposed to our secondary schools where maybe you're with the teacher for 44 to 90 minutes at a time, our elementary teachers are really with our kids for the vast majority of that time. And they get to see so much in those hours about how my daughter and our children are learning. They get to hear them read. They get to see the interactions they have with their peers. They get to listen to the kinds of things they're talking about in the curriculum. They get to hear them explain their thinking. They get to do all of these things. None of those things are numeric. None of those things are points-based. But all of those things are really valuable information about kids learning. And those things can't often be quantified. So in our elementary system, we actually haven't used a point percent letter system because there's so many things that our teachers are seeing that they can communicate back to us that really don't fit into a point system. They really don't fit into that model of a grade book where we list out every assignment and the points attached to them. We also know we've done a lot of work with our teachers, and here's just a picture of some of the work that we've done, where we ask them to put up the different letter grades, and we post them on the wall, and then we ask the teachers to write on a Post-it note in your class, not like on the report card, but actually in your class, what does it mean to do A-level work? What does a B mean? And we do that all the way down through all of the grades. And regardless of if we do this at an elementary school where it might be 3 teachers who've taught together for years, or we do it in a whole big setting with a whole high school, what we see is really different conceptions about what those things mean. And if we want our grades to clearly communicate how students are learning, we have to make sure that we're being clear. When we say a student is achieving the expectations, what does that mean? What does that look like, and how are we achieving at that level? And we know there's some problems, even though our elementary grades don't use those point collection systems. We know that there's some problems even when we do, and I'll tell you the story of 3 learners, and we'll use some numbers real quick. Let's say, and I want you to pretend that these learners are actually working on a very specific skill. You're going to go skydiving. They're packing your parachute. And I want you to think, as we talk about these 3 students, which one you want packing yours? So first we have student 1, really inconsistent, just really all over the place. All right, one day on, one day off, really hard to gauge what's going on. This student, if you were to average all those together, we get a 70. You might have this student, really struggled at first, really struggled, but now doing great and has really shown a lot of improvement, now is doing wonderfully. This student will get a 70. You might even, I know when I was teaching, I had this student several times. You might know this student. They come in, they think they know everything, and then things just fall apart, and they go downhill. This student would actually get a 70. Now, I know which one I want packing my parachute. There's only one of them. The problem is, when we average those together, the story of those students' learning gets lost. They all got the same score. But what we really need is for somebody to tell us what I just told you. Here's the story of their learning. Here's what's going on. Here's what you need to know about their progress. Here's what's happening, and really talk about that so that we get that clear feedback. We know even, I'll tell you, I was a Parkway graduate. I got a lot of A's in Parkway. I really mastered the 89.5. Like, I worked the 89.5. Because at the end of the day, I get that 4 points on the GPA scale. There were a lot of students in my classes who got 99, 100%. They were doing all this stuff. On paper, there's no difference between me and that student. But you know who there's a big difference to? That teacher. And if you ask that teacher, tell me about Kevin Beckner's learning versus this student, they would tell you very different stories. So with our new elementary progress report, we're really trying to focus on that. Tell the story, describe the learning, tell what's happening so that we can get that clear picture of what's really happening with our children. Because we know they're more than just numbers. They're not just numbers in a calculator. There's a real story behind each of their learning that's unique and that deserves to be described and talked about, and give that feedback in a way that's going to be detailed and specific. So that group recommended that we revise our elementary reporting system based on all the things that we just talked about, and we continued that work. And in 13-14, we continued our Project Parkway elementary grading advisory, so community input, getting parents in the conversation. We also formed the elementary grading and feedback team, where we brought in teachers from each building, and we brought in half a dozen principals, and said, okay, if the recommendation from our teachers is redesign the system, what do we want to do? That's what they really worked on, is designing a new system. As we had those same conversations with Project Parkway and with parents, and different parents came to the table, what we kept hearing was actually this. Check your boxes, fill out your stuff, do what you need to do. At the end of the day, tell me about my kid. You are with them. Talk to me specifically. We have parents say, I scan the comments and look for my daughter's name. If I see it, I read it. If I don't, I don't. Tell me about my child. Give me the feedback that I need about my child. Because we know that all of our students, they're more than just numbers, they're more than just letters, they're more than just grades. They have faces like these. My 2 favorite Parkway students, these are them. That's McKinley on the left, that's Lincoln on the right. We sat in McKinley, she's in 1st grade now at Oak Brook. We sat in her conference last year, her first one, her kindergarten conference. And we were about 2 minutes in, and my wife leans over and says, I don't understand. She wants to know, tell me, is she confident? Tell me, is she enjoying school? Tell me how she's learning. Tell me about her, what happens when she gets stuck? What happens when she, talk to me about what's actually happening. What does she need to work on? Where are the areas where she needs to improve? Okay, now, sure, tell me some scores, tell me some education stuff. Okay, but really, tell me the story about my child. Tell me what's happening, tell me what's going on. And in all of these cases, what we also know in the research we've done about grading and feedback is that grading is way less important than feedback. That feedback is actually the thing that matters most. You and I, in our professional careers and in our lives outside of this setting, we get feedback all the time. We get feedback about how we're doing, about what we can do to improve, about what we need to work on, where we might be strong. And that's the kind of thing that all the research and every study we found says feedback is what matters the most. And so in our new system, we're really focused on providing descriptive feedback to really make sure that we're telling the story of kids learning. In our new system, we want to do three things. Be more specific. And more specific not by having more boxes, but be more specific by actually talking about each student. It's really focused on comments. Telling that story, describing what's happening, talking about the goals, talking about the struggles. So be more specific by focusing on comments. Secondly, be more clear. With 21 different things in English alone, it's hard to tell, are they doing what they're supposed to? So in each content area, our families will see three different things, three different expectations that they're working on in each content. We also want to make it more accessible, where it's not one of those things where you get the piece of paper, and maybe we put it in a file, and maybe it shows up some point, but actually, I'm at work, I want to look up her progress report. So the system that we've designed, parents will get paper this trimester, just like they've always received, but we also have an online system where they'll be able to access their child's report wherever they are, so that whether they're using a phone or a Chromebook or a laptop, they can access their child's progress report. So throughout this work, we've also been changing our language, and rather than talking about those letter grades that have been so difficult to summarize students' learning, we're really talking about, throughout the course of the year, are they making the kind of progress that they need to get to where we need to be by the end of the year? Are they on track to get there? Or are they not yet on track to get there? Now, that's just the overall rating to say, here's where we are, but we know that there's going to be a lot of description and describing and talking about what's going on at each of those levels. I told you I was the 89.5 student. I'd get an A. The 99.5 student has a very different story. We'll have students who are in a spectrum. You know, they're barely on track or they're 3 grade levels ahead, and we want our teachers to talk about that, name that, say what they're doing that makes them either very far ahead or just barely there. So we continued in this conversation, and in this past year, some of the work that we've been doing, or 14-15 last year, the work we did. We continued the Project Parkway Elementary Grading Advisory, inviting our parents in, sharing with them the work that we were doing, asking for their feedback, responding to some of the things that they told us. We really spent some time developing clear expectations. So what does it mean to be on track? Through the great work that our elementary curriculum team did, they brought teachers together and for every grade level described and defined what does it look like? What are the indicators that would show a student is on track at this grade level in this content? For K through 5 and for each content area. We also did the same for our character expectations. We said one of the things we believe is that the behaviors that support learning are valued and reported separately, so we do have a character component of it. Did the same kind of work in that area, trying to define specifically what does a student do when they're really meeting the expectations in the area of self-discipline or relationship skills or responsible decision making, and doing that at each grade level, because what quality of relationship skill looks like for a kindergartner is very different than what it looks like for a 5th grader. So they've done that at each of those different levels. In addition to developing clear expectations, we've also been communicating with parents. Over the last year, we've actually been to every PTO in Parkway Elementary Schools, also met with PTO leadership. Our communication department has been wonderful, producing lots of things that we've sent home with parents, including our end of the year, we sent every student home with a flyer about the new progress report, back to school newsletter, had things, so really trying to make sure that people are aware of the work that we're doing. We've been doing a lot of providing teacher development, and making sure that our teachers know that the emphasis is really about describing the kind of learning that's going on, telling that story, naming goals, talking about what students need to work on to improve, and really making sure that they feel as comfortable as they possibly can. Obviously, big change, and so there's anxiety around that. There's going to be. But I can tell you that our team has been working very hard to make sure that our teachers get that development so that they feel confident going into the new progress report. We also field tested the new progress report at 2 of our elementary schools, McKelvey Elementary and Shenandoah Valley Elementary, where we had, for 2 trimesters, both second and third trimester last year, we used this as their reporting system. And we were able to collect input, both from staff and parents about that process, make adjustments to our system where we need to make them, and really respond to that feedback so that we can make sure that as it goes to all schools this year, that we've made the appropriate changes to make sure that people are getting the kinds of information that they need for their children. Here's a picture, a screenshot of the final product and where we ended up. This is the online version, and we're not going to go through all of it. But this is a mock-up of where we are. You notice that the comments, they keep, I can't scroll on this screen, but they keep going down below. These teachers are really spending a lot of energy and effort to make sure that they're clearly capturing what's going on with each of these children learning. So all of our work, I'll end with the same quote we started with. We want to develop this system so that it helps us improve student learning, not just report it at certain intervals, but make it actually part of what we can use to leverage students' learning so that they achieve at higher levels. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I'd just like to say that Dr. Grant Wiggins of blessed memory would be very pleased with this. Those of us who were on the board back then, he would just be very ecstatic about this.
Just again, since we have people in the audience, what do you want to explain why Dee said that? What was his philosophy? Maybe Kevin, you want to?
Yeah, Grant Wiggins really wrote a book about starting with the end in mind, and he worked with us here in Parkway to help us develop our mission and vision statements, but really starting with what do we want kids to know and be able to do, and building backwards from that and doing everything in our system, everything, to that end, to make sure that if our mission is to make sure that kids are capable, curious, and confident learners, then every decision that we make should be built towards achieving those goals. And so that's really what we tried to do here, is build backwards. If we want kids really learning at high levels, we want them taking feedback and responding to it, we want them working for really learning's sake, then we want to design our system to do just that.
At the PTO Leadership Council meeting last week, which I forgot to mention, actually, but we had some feedback from some of them. They were concerned about the transition from a 5th grader going into 6th grade because we'll be back to a different report card, and I thought maybe you would want to talk about that.
Thank you for the opportunity. A couple of things, and we've had this question. People are very concerned about their kids, and they should be, and so we appreciate those questions. A couple of things to note. Our students currently, even in our current system, though they have letters in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and they don't have them prior to that, this transition that they make from 5th to 6th grade currently is the first time that they transition to a points-based system. So our students are making that transition currently, and just like every other thing between the 5th and 6th grade transition, obviously it involves quite a bit of work. The best work that we can do to help make sure they're prepared for that is to make sure they know everything that they need to know and can do everything that they need to do, that they're fully prepared to go to that next level, and that's still our focus. In our field test schools, I know that at that same meeting you had 2 staff members from our field test schools there, and when I asked them initially, what do you want to share with this group, what would you want them to know, that was actually one of the things they said is, our kids transitioned beautifully from 5th to 6th grade. They weren't hindered in any way. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do. They were focused on their learning, and that they're making that transition well. It's certainly something we're going to keep an eye on and make sure we continue to do that well. So far, we've seen that that is working, and we need to make sure that it continues to work.
Another thing that was mentioned was the current report card has a lot of cookie cutter comments, and especially I think there was a mother of twins who especially noticed that because they had the same recorder and the same comments with different children's names in them. Does this system allow for that, or are teachers more
Yeah, I'll tell you one of the things I told you, we've been working on professional development. I can tell you that our elementary curriculum team, and particularly Susan Irby, has done a ton of work with our staff members to have that very conversation. I know that many of our principals are taking that conversation back and saying, we don't just do canned comments. We don't just copy and paste. One of the reasons I know that teachers said they felt pressure to sort of do that in the past is I shared with you that number 1,200, that our current report card takes them hours and hours and hours. And the reality of that is there are only so many in the day. And if I have to spend them rating 1,200 little things, you know, one thing that gets squeezed out is giving feedback and giving specific feedback. So I was at a PTO meeting at one of our elementary schools the other day and actually talking to one of our teachers, and then she was like, well, we were really focusing on comments before, and so this really frees us to be able to be more specific. But I know that they are doing, our elementary team is doing a lot of work with teachers, and I know our principals are having that same conversation. Even thinking about when you write comments, even helping develop them, what do you include? So even talking about, here are some things to think about. Are there goals the student is working on? Are there specific areas of strengths that are unique for the student? And commenting on those things so that they're not just copy-paste.
Back when I was in school, when the teachers hand wrote the comments, I'm sure, it just takes so much time.
D is a pleasure to have in class.
That's right. And I was. The other thing, it's great that this is online, and I understand the assessments are going to be there so that the parents can dig down and, if they wish, and look at, you know, these assessments. But what about, we have a small percentage of parents who have no internet access or a phone that they can look it up on. So what are we doing for them? I mean, getting a paper copy at the trimester is one thing, but they're left out of all that, the ability to look up their child's record until the assessment period's over.
Yeah, great question. You're right that with the progress report itself, we have paper versions. We have several reports that we can run. One to just print them, their report with all the comments. We also have one, though, that's really helpful, and I'm sharing all this with principals, making sure they know about all this, that actually tells us which parents have and haven't logged into the system. I mean, we don't know how long they were there, how many times they logged in, but just did they access it or not? And we're actually going to be reaching out to those parents.
We can tell? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome.
Well, because you have to, we have to make sure the kid's data is safe. And so you have to verify who you are to be able to see that, and part of that we can just see, oh, they verified who they are.
Okay.
So we can see that information. And so we'll be reaching out to many of those families who have not logged in to say, you haven't logged in, do you need us to provide you some paper copies of these reports? And that will be the same for that attendance and assessment report as well. So if they need to get that as a hard copy as well, they can.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I don't know if we mentioned that or not, but how does this transfer to students? Like at progress reporting time, does the teacher meet with students one-on-one and explain their progress and talk about goals, et cetera?
Yeah, really good point. And I think that's actually a point in our system that we need to keep working on, regardless of what our progress reporting system is involving students in that goal setting process. I know we actually, when we redesigned the teacher evaluation model a few years ago, put that explicitly in. We actually have one that's like involves students, does student goal setting with them. So I think that's a continued focus, even outside the progress report, is just how do we engage students in that process? I think it's something we're continuing to work on. I don't know that we've mastered that yet. In fact, I think when we look at some of our information about where our teachers are placing their, like they're saying, I need to grow in this area, that's one of the areas that they're saying, I need to continue to work on student goal setting. I know many of the schools and their the students' teachers do try to, prior to conferences, meet with the students beforehand and say, here's what I'm going to be talking about. I know many of our schools have even transitioned in the upper grades. I was at River Bend a few weeks ago. One of their grade levels was doing student-led conferences to try to engage students in that very thing, that I know my learning and I'm able to talk about what I'm doing. But being honest, I'd say that's still a goal for us to make sure that students are involved in that.
Yeah, well, that's an important point, because telling the parents is one thing, but telling the student and letting them have the internal aspect of knowing how they're doing, I think, is really important. But, I think the comments are great in terms of, how the student is doing at a given time regarding a certain objective or whatever it may be. But is there a point in the comments where the teacher states, this is what I will be doing to help your child?
We looked at some of the example. Yeah, we looked at some of the comments that our field test schools did, and I would never step out and say every teacher's doing that, but we did see a lot of that is, here's what we're working on specifically. Here's something that I've been encouraging your daughter to do. I've been encouraging her to blank, whether that's in math or English or science. So we did see multiple comments like that. Just like I would say about student goal setting, I don't think we're fully there yet, and that's going to be a work in progress and something we need to help our teachers continue to work on, because I think that's well put, is, we need to talk specifically, what are we doing? And even beyond that, as a parent, what can you do to help? And that's what we've heard a lot of our parents say too. How do I help? And how do I know what to do to help?
That's important, because if a parent hears a child has a certain deficit in a given area, they leave saying, well, I wonder what's going to be done about it. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think we also got this from Dr. Wiggins. Dr. Wiggins taught us that everything is measurable.
Yeah.
So how does this translate to data that we can track? Overall trends in our students' learning, real number stuff. I'm a huge proponent of what you're doing. I think it's great. I think it's what parents need. I think it's what teachers need and what students need. But as an overall school district, we need to always be moving forward and progressing and having our students achieve at certain levels, continue to grow. So how can we report those measurements?
Yeah, it's a both and. It's not an either or. I think that's also a Dr. Wiggins thing. It's both and, not an either or. And that's in our new system. Not only can you click on the progress report, right beneath that, you can click on attendance and assessment results. So we're still collecting all the same data points that we've been collecting. We know we have our MAP scores and things like that, but we also have their Fontes and Pinnell, which is their diagnostic reading level. We have their scholastic reading inventory. We have their benchmark assessments that are Parkway design tests in English and math, and the list could go on. We have all of these different things that we're doing with students. Those don't go away. And in fact, those become part of the evidence that teachers are looking at to say whether a student's on track right now or not. Because I might be seeing something in class, but then I have all these other things that are saying, whoa, 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 something's wrong. So our teachers, actually, that's one of the things we've really been encouraging them to do is you look at all the evidence, all of the evidence. So that's going to include all the measurable data points, all the test scores, all the assignments that I've had, all the quizzes that I've had, all that stuff that is quantifiable, alongside with all the things that I'm watching and I'm able to see and observe that are not quantifiable directly, and then say, okay, this all helps me together inform whether this child is or isn't where they need to be. And frankly, some of that might be, their test scores and everything are fine, but I'm really seeing that they're not connecting the real meaning with it. So in that case, that's where you have both going on. Here are their scores.
Kids have anxiety over test taking.
Right.
They understand the material. They can do the work, but they have trouble demonstrating it on a standardized test or some other type of exam. But if a teacher really knows the student and really has seen the student's development, they can tell the parents the grade on this MAP test doesn't really indicate your child's growth or progress.
And usually they can say, here's what I've seen that shows me they understand, and really point to that specific, that idea of everything is measurable. I'm going to point to evidence that I saw that shows me they understand. And if I had to scale that, here's what I would say. And you certainly can do that. His caveat is you can measure anything if you're willing to accept that your data won't be perfect. And that's part of that piece is we have that observation alongside all the quantifiable, but even the quantifiable, student could have test anxiety, have a bad day, had a problem at home right before the test. They could also have a moment of divine clarity and magically, either way, we know that our measurements aren't perfect, but we try to look at all of that evidence to give the best assessment that we can.
Okay, so now you've done this great work in elementary school, and you're really teaching the parents how they can learn about their students' progress. So what happens in the next few years when these same students are in middle school and high school, and the parents are expecting to have a really great understanding of what their kids can and can't do and where they're falling behind or where they're excelling? Because we know once you get to ninth grade, everything has to be translated into that point system for kids to be able to go to college. So how do you address that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're really clear with parents on, because often, I said, we've been to all the elementary PTOs, and that's a frequent question: what does this mean for high school? We tell them this. We know that there are external pressures on us, that we're not going to go to a system like this for high school, because we have to make sure our students aren't put at a disadvantage in getting into a college or getting a scholarship or whatever the case may be. That being said, we're working even now with we had workshops in every content area this summer for our secondary teachers about grading and feedback, talking about, so if we can't go to a system like that, how can we work within the system we have to provide better and more clear feedback? How can we make sure that an A is an A, and we're clear about the expectations of what that means? How can we make sure that we're even arranging our grade book? I mean, even something as simple as arranging my grade book in a way that's going to more clearly communicate what students are expected to learn. We've even been talking about topics as specific as you can make your grade book categories in Infinite Campus what kids are expected to learn rather than the things they're supposed to do. So rather than homework, test, quiz, I expect them to do this, I expect them to do this, I expect them to do this. Even those things provide better feedback and more clarity. So we're really working with our teachers at the secondary level to do those kinds of things, where we work within the system we have to really try to do that, knowing that it's going to be imperfect, but trying to get to those same kinds of ideas. I'll also tell you that for middle school, it's actually part of middle school study, is the grading and feedback work. Even there, it's not likely we're going to do away with letter grades, but how can we work the system to better provide clear, consistent, accurate feedback about kids' learning so that they can use that to really improve on what they know and are able to do.
The students get to a certain age where the reporting is not just to the benefit of the parents, it's to the benefit of the student. And as they get older and older, they need to understand what will be required of them and what the steps are to take for them to achieve the requirement. And I know that, I mean, back 5 or more years ago when my kids were in this building, the teachers were starting to give them a matrix of, you will achieve a B if you could do A, B, and C. You will achieve an A if you can do E, F, and G, along with A, B, and C, whatever. And I suspect that they're still giving kids that kind of feedback.
Lots, and they're really trying to do that, and they're being creative. I mean, the work that I'm seeing our teachers do in this area is really amazing. Working within the system that we have, but still finding those ways to do the very things you're talking about. We've seen teachers at many different schools trying all kinds of unbelievable things to give kids better feedback, to make sure they know what they have to do. If they want to get an A, here's what you have to do. Here's what that looks like. Here's what learning at that level sounds like when you're talking about it in a way that you really understand it. So rubrics is a way to do that, where you're just defining very clearly, here's what it means to do it at this level. And there are lots of other ways to provide that feedback, and they're trying lots of things to do that so that kids can really get that kind of feedback and know exactly what they need to do.
And that helps alleviate the problem of a really hard teacher or a really easy teacher, a really hard grader and a really easy grader.
We all pick our college classes based on that. Right? I can have this teacher or that one. I'm going to go for that one. Yeah, and we don't want that to really, I mean, especially when you think about high school and the dollars and cents often attached with scholarship money and things like that, that's really a practice we want to get beyond, is hard grader, easy grader. What we want to have is high expectations and clear expectations about what it takes to achieve at that level. So it's not really teacher dependent, but it's much more about kids learning dependent and getting that grade.
Thank you.
Kevin, you alluded a little bit to the pilots. What else did you get from teachers in terms of their learning and the time? You did mention a little bit that the
time it takes. Yeah, we've actually, when we share this with parents, often we have a parent raise their hand and say, this looks like it's going to take teachers a lot more time. What we found from our pilot schools is they said it didn't take us more time, but the time we had to spend on it was better spent. giving more specific feedback, more valuable feedback, rather than, I mean, when we think about our current, and I know we don't have an example in front of us, but our current report card actually does require us to rate students on a scale on all these different things. And our teachers are really conscientious and really concerned with that, and they spend a lot of time doing that. So our current report card takes them a really laborious amount of time. What they said, the two field test schools, the feedback they said was, it did not take us more time, but the time we felt was better spent giving feedback that mattered.
So we tried to do a good job putting it out there, advising parents that this is going to happen, but I imagine at open houses it was talked about in elementary school and more PTO meetings, but what are we going to do about those parents who call and say, I didn't hear about this, I didn't know that this was happening? I imagine it's their principal.
Give him Kevin's number.
The principal will probably have to figure out a plan.
Most of that is going to fall to the building principal because they're there with them and talk through it, and they'll be able to, a lot of our principals are doing things beyond just what as a district we're doing. They're putting it in their regular newsletter, they're putting it in their weekly email. I know we get from Oak Brook, from Mr. Shirley, a weekly update from Oak Brook. A lot of principals are including it in that and trying to really communicate it as best they can. That's still going to happen though, and we just need to be sensitive.
Don't open those emails ever. And
yes.
So we just.
Yeah, I assume that if I'm lucky, 30% of mine get read. So, yeah, we understand that, and so we do need to be sensitive to that some people might still be caught off guard despite all our efforts, and we're just going to have to help then have some of these same conversations with them to explain why, what are we doing, where did this come from, so that they know that this wasn't out of the blue, even though for them it's certainly going to feel that way.
Right. Thank you.
Having been through this another system, that's a good question, because we'll have a percentage of folks that...
Last time around we did this same
So
thing.
I think all of us need to be conscious of that, and we have to be good teachers, good listeners, and provide the information. But we will experience that when this goes live.
We'll put
it.
Kevin's number at the bottom of each report card.
But I have to say,
I'm joking.
I was at Sorrento open house one of the first weeks of school, and Kathy Fisher did a great job of there was, 120 parents in the gym, and Kevin gave basically this presentation, and had people come up afterwards. And so, to Kevin's point, he's really been working hard, Lisa and others, getting the information out. Principals have been doing a great job, but Paul and his department have been wonderful. So I think we've done a good job. We talked about communication earlier tonight. I think in this area, I think we've tried really hard, and we'll still have a few people that may have not understood it fully, but I really do feel we've done a pretty good job of from the very beginning of getting the information out.
Thank you, and thank you for showing us your kids. They look just like you.
No, they look like your wife.
Don't worry about that. They'll grow out of it.
So I just want to thank Kevin for his leadership with this, but I would be remiss to not also thank the people that have been behind the scenes with Kevin. Susan Irby, Toby McQuarrie, who's not with us anymore, was greatly involved in this last year. Jen Abdel-Azam, Liz, Jason, and his team with technology and the design of this and working through all of that. Paul and his team. It really has been a team effort, and Kevin has done a masterful job of pulling them all together. So thank you, Kevin, and all the people who were with you.
Thank you very much. I followed many of your meetings and it's been wonderful to see it progress, and come November, we'll get some good feedback. All right, 15.0 work session. There is none. Call for special meeting. There is none. Our next scheduled closed session is anticipated that it will be held on Wednesday, November 11th, 2015 at 6 p.m. here at Central Middle School. Details of the closed session will be posted within 24 hours of that anticipated meeting. May I have a motion and a second to